how to be, how to just be, how do we be in the present, and not sweat the small stuff. So building stepping stones to that new behavior I talked about, how to cope with stored behavior. So meaning, how do we, okay, here's the new behavior, but how do we get rid of the old behavior? Well, we got to do something. We can't just slip back into the old behavior. We're not going to have new behavior. You know, you're following me? And then we need to have new positive emotional balance in order for that to happen. Okay, because if we're at a balance, and we're just going to talk about one of those balances, emotional, to achieve long-lasting change, I'm going to teach you about the 6 stages of change, which is one of my favorite models from the 60s. So I didn't even realize until a couple days ago when I had a colleague, you know, from a company saying, you know, a lot of people just don't know how to sweat the small stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have like all these books. I've had these books on my shelf, all of them in every single one of my 4 offices, my home, my Orma, my Murray office, my other, you know, I've worked at so many offices. So I have stacks of books in each office, and I have duplicates of these books. And the thing is I find a lot of books at thrift stores. So I'm always looking for certain ones. I've actually given these away because I have extra copies of them, because I always buy them if I see them. So it's like, oh my gosh, well, let's do a PowerPoint on let's not sweat the small stuff, because Carlson says all and everything is small. Now, you might not agree with that. Like, oh, you know, well, my trauma is not small, and my loss and grief is not small. Or, you know, losing my job is not small. COVID's not small, but we're sweating, right? So it's like, how do we not sweat the small stuff? Well, everything he says is small. So we need to realize it's small. And this is going to hopefully help change your mind on that. So this one's like just how to sweat the small stuff. This one's like how to sweat the small stuff at work, how to sweat the small stuff for women and for the family. So I just love all these little ideas. They're just, it's just a cute book. So I actually found some of these, the numbers. Okay, so there's 100 of them. So I've listed it with each one, and we're going to kind of go over those. And so I'm going to read some of those, like, you know, number 3, number 2, number 1, don't sweat the small stuff. So how to be present, live in the present, number 10. So I'm just going to go over 5 of these stepping stones to see if we can get there. Okay, so number 1 is just don't sweat the small stuff, and on understanding how to be present in a space, meaning here's your space. What does that look like? Just being in a space. And this is why I love this quote by Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, okay? That's what I call the frontal lobes. There's a space in between your brain where you're in the frontal lobes, where you reason and organize and can be logical and emotional. And then there's space between where before you go to your fight, flight, or freeze. There really is. Sometimes just seconds, but there is space in your power to choose your response. Now, if you're going into shock and you're going to fight or flight, you cannot stop that. That is just survival. But besides everything else with that. So in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So that gives you power. So power gives growth and freedom. And it also gives you space. So we want to create space. So how do we do that? So like I said, I just love the word, because when I'm teaching parenting, it's like, how do you sit in your kids' space? How do you sit in your wife's or your spouse or your husband's space? How do you just sit in it? Don't fix it. Don't repair it. Don't judge it. Just sit in it. And that's actually being present. So I'm just going to read a couple things from each one of these as we kind of go through them, just to give you an idea, and then you can pick up these used books anywhere or order them, or if you want more. But we allow past problems and future concerns to dominate our present moment. Okay, that's just how it works. Getting past your past is dealing with the past, because our present problems hijack our future concerns, and our past moments hijack our present. Okay, that's called anxiety. That's called agoraphobia, that's called depression, that's called lots of things too. So it ends up with frustration, anxiety, depression, hopelessness. So we allow past problems and future concerns to dominate, and I call hijack our present moments. Why do we allow that? On the flip side, we also postpone our gratification, our priorities, our happiness, our value systems, which I talked about, you know, all those things to just take over the present. That's a problem. Okay, 29. Well, you know, in order to be present and to be in someone's space or your own space, by the way, I'm going to skip over 68, which is one of my favorite habits. I mean, 68, sorry, 28. A little plug for Stephen Covey, habit 5, seek to understand first before you're understood, is number 28. It's always a good habit to learn. Besides 29 here is to listen. How to become a better listener. If you're in the present and you're not sweating the small stuff, you're listening. So you are, you know, in some ways we fail to listen because it's a symbol of the way we live, right? So we often treat communication as a race to who can get to the end, right? And that's not being present at all. So being a better listener, seeking to understand, and all you need to know about that, if you want to be a better listener and you really want to really learn how to do that, number 1 is habit 5, Stephen Covey. Seek to understand first before you're understood. Okay, so 55, breathe. Okay, so let's breathe. Like let's breathe. That's always a good one, right? Of like, oh yeah, we just need to breathe. Well, we need to listen and then we need to breathe before we speak. Okay, so breathe before we speak is number 55 on this one, how to be in the space, in the present. So how do we do that? Well, you know, it involves us pausing and breathing, which I won't pause very much through this because I'm going to slam through it, right? So there is no listening in this. This is just talking. So it's like, at first it's like, okay, there's a time gap between our voices. It may seem like an eternity. When I'm doing therapy and there's space, which is silence, it's really good. It's sometimes makes people feel uncomfortable, and it makes me feel uncomfortable sometimes, but it's really good to have space and just let it be in that space. Quiet the mind, 71. So we're going to quiet the mind. How do we do that? He's great in explaining this one. He just says this: all humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That was a quote in his book, but not from him. So I'm not sure I would go quite this far, but I'm certain that quieting the mind is a foundation of inner peace. So inner peace translates into outer peace. Okay, so you got to start always inside. So that's his little, so that's the little question. How do we quiet our mind inside so we can have outer peace? So that's, you know, and there's another one that he talks about where he just sits quietly every day. I do the same. You gotta take time to sit quietly in your thoughts, in your body, in your mind. You know, and it's not just meditation. It's not meditation at all. It's mindfulness, which is this little cycle over here on this slide. It's like, okay, what am I noticing? Here's the sound, thoughts, and emotions. That's what the body does. Thoughts, emotions. And then we're going to build awareness to that. And then we're going to do a relaxation, automatic balance. You're going to sit in your car for 2 minutes before you go in the house. You're going to stop and pull over. You're going to stop and do something right before you go into work. Same thing. So that's number 1. Number 2, peace with imperfection. The root of being uptight is our unwillingness to accept life as being different in a way that what we expected from our expectations. Well, think about this. I'm going to read again. The root of being uptight is our unwillingness to accept life as it is, being difficult in any way from our expectations. Okay, so I have 2 books on that. Okay, so that's on page 205 in this book, that quote. So here's this book, and all my books are referenced in the back of this PowerPoint. So this is one of my favorite books. It's in my top 5. I have like 10 books in my top 5. So it doesn't make sense. I would say this is in my top 5 for sure. But I know that I have a top 5 list and I have it on my website, but I'm like, yeah, you know. And so, but this one is definitely one of my favorite. I like the models from the 50s and 60s. This book is 1974. Okay. The Road Less Traveled, Scott Peck, right? Okay. So I'm going to talk about this later in this PowerPoint. So this is life. Okay. This is one of 4, he quotes the 4 noble truths from Buddha taught by life is suffering. So this goes along with this quote. Once we understand that life is suffering and it's difficult and it causes us to be uptight and we're unwilling to accept that, we have problems, right? So this is the great truth that I got to clear my throat. That once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand it and accept it, because that's acceptance, then life is no longer difficult, because once it's accepted, the fact that life is difficult, it no longer matters. So think about how much we sweat the small stuff of like, life is really difficult. Well, that's a huge thing, but it's not. It's like, you know what? If life is difficult and we just accept that, it doesn't matter anymore. We don't fight it. So that's that. That's a little bit of that. That's just a little bit of that, just a little bit. And then the other part is imperfection. So Gifts of Imperfection, Brené Brown, top 5 book, totally. So this one is about imperfection. Now, number 2 on his list, to stop sweating the small stuff and get real about being in the present, getting real about life, and just stop, you know, pushing things, is make peace with imperfection. So this is all I'm going to say about that, is focus on what's wrong with something and our needs to fix it. If we focus on what's wrong and our need to fix it, it gets us into the focus of what's wrong. Same thing with life. If we accept that it's difficult, and we're focusing on that, you're going to focus on what's wrong with life, right? So it implies that we are dissatisfied. And that's what, you know, the opposite of that is peace with imperfection. Things are difficult, things are wrong, things are not the way that we expected it to be, especially last year, first time in America's history, right? Lots of things that are different. And life's not fair, number 17. So it's like, okay, that goes along with that. So he says, okay, so if life's not fair, then surrender yourself to that. So thinking that life should be fair, or that someone, you know, someday it will be, it's not, and it won't. I mean, this is like, wow, this sucks, right? And then it's like, when we make this mistake, we tend to spend a lot of time wallowing and complaining about what's wrong with our life, right? And one thing about this is, nice things about surrendering to the fact that life isn't fair is that it keeps us from feeling sorry for ourselves, and by engaging us to do the very best we can with what we have. So that's where the Road Less Travel goes into play after that too. Quiet time, I kind of talked about spending just quiet time every day. So it's always, he says he spends, of course, he gets up early and he spends time in the morning. It's absolutely silent outside when he does. He's in absolute complete solitude, peace, being alone and having some time to reflect, work, or simply enjoy the quiet is essential every single day. So quiet time, 26, is setting time aside to, you know, being in this. So cut you some slack. That one's a good one. I like this one because it's like, okay, that's the wrong number, by the way. It's 78, I believe. I changed it and I must not have saved it. Yep. So by the way, that's not 76 on this slide, it's 78. Cut yourself some slack. When you lose it, just start again. when you lose it. Everybody's uptight, frustrated, stressed, reactive. When you do this, it's okay. And to this, especially with parenting and other stuff, it's like, you know what? I lost it. It's about the repair. John Gottman says, here's the conflict within ourselves or with other people. We're all going to have conflict. You don't resolve it, basically. About 80% of that. I say, 100 more than that. But in his research, you don't resolve it, but what matters is how you repair it. So if we're going to cut ourselves some slack, it will give us better guidance to repairing it. So that's the part of that, and then that imperfection. So we're starting, this imperfection. It's okay to be imperfected. We have to give ourselves that gift of not being perfect. And that will help lighten us up. That will help us accept life is not fair. So that's this whole concept here. So 85 is just that. Yeah, I got those two wrong. No, I got those two wrong. 83 on that one. I got those two. Yeah, I was looking at the other list that I made. So those two are wrong. So lighten up is 83, not 85. So it's like the root of being uptight or unwilling to accept life is being different in any way from our expectations, is the quote that's here. Very simply, we want things to be a certain way, but we're not certain, but it's not a certain way. So life is simple as that. It's like, we want this certain way. So our limited perspective, our hopes and our fears become our measure of life. And then when circumstances don't fit into our ideals, they become our difficulties. And that last quote was Benjamin Franklin. So if we turn it into difficulties when we don't get what we want and they don't fit into our ideals, that's where we need to lighten up. So that's 83. So, okay. So this is the good part. Why do we store emotions and behavior so we can't get to a new behavior? So this is the toughest part, this last part of this webinar, is because we don't have long-lasting change or behavioral change because we have wired our brain together to do this or to do that. And that's from our childhood. That is from what we've just done. It's called habit, right? So our brain is really, really smart organ. So it's like, if we had to learn how to start our car and drive every single day, we would be exhausted. So it's called autopilot. So our neurotransmitters, they fire together and then they wire together. And so if we do something over and over and go over again, like driving, we have now wired our brain. Now, if you were 10 and you've never drove before, you're not going to know how to drive. But if you're 16 and you practice and you practice and you practice, and then it's like automatic by the time we, go into adulthood. So these chemicals transmit nerve impulses and act as communicators to the body and the brain. It tells us what to do, how to run the race, where to go. Our desires, our memories, our intuitions, and our dreams are all stored on this, which gives us mind and body responses, right? So that's also to trauma and past experiences. If a dog bit you when you were 3, you're going to have, a response system every time a dog is barking and chasing you. So it keeps us alive. So for example, fear will activate our fight, flight, or freeze, our midbrain, and may produce tears. So crying is literally serves to relieve the stress that's caused by the continual chemical emission. So it's chemicals are emotions that are stored in the body. So eventually that leads to illness or trauma or repeated behavior, right? So emotions that help us survive turn kind of against us. So that's from Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die. Promise, when you bury and trap emotions, they don't die, they grow, they cause other issues. So this one, kindness, self-explanatory, but avoiding weatherproofing on this one in the book, 41 is kind of, I'm going to explain what weatherproofing is. So he says to avoid weatherproofing. So that's kind of funny because it's like, wait, wouldn't it be good to have like coping skills ahead of time? So when the storm came, we would be weatherproofed. Okay. So this is what he says about that. So we weatherproof a home, right? So we look for the cracks and the leaks and the imperfections. And he kind of relates it to relationships in our lives, but by doing the very same thing. So essentially weatherproofing means that you are on the careful lookout for what needs to be fixed and repaired. It's finding the cracks and the flaws of life and either trying to fix them or at least point them out to others. So that's what we don't want to point out. It doesn't do us any good to weatherproof our emotions and our behavior. You need to fix this. You need to fix your emotions. You need to fix. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in relationships. It turns toxic. It doesn't work. So that's that one. So on to 4. Okay, so balance. So emotional balance is super important. Well, all balances are, and I've talked about physical balance in lots of other webinars that you can look at. And I talk about balance and boundaries and burnout a lot because we have to have this balance in order to change your behavior, which is we're getting to it, step 5 here. So the point is, how do we change our behavior for this new year? How do we improve a long-lasting change inside? Now, if you're burned out and you are not balanced in these balances, good luck. It does not work. If you don't sleep well, which is my number 1, you are not going to want to get up early and go to the gym if that's what you're going to do now, or whatever it is for a new behavior. You have to have a reward system. You have to have, and these next 2 slides are huge, is the majority of this this PowerPoint. So this is where this just gives you an idea of like, okay, so we're just going to talk about spiritual and emotional balance in this one. So emotional intelligence 1 and 2 is on YouTube for webinars if you want to watch more about emotions. So how to get grounded, connected, we just talked about that. Number 1, how do you get grounded? That's presence. So we have to fill with love and trust, 91 and 95 on there, in order to get to this one. Let me read a little bit about 91. I had them all marked and going through them here. So our attitudes, choices, acts of kindness, willingness to be the first to reach out will take us towards a goal. Okay, that's it. You know, whatever goal, but you have to act on it. So I'm going to talk about action in a minute. The next time you find yourself frustrated at a lack of love in your own life or the lack of love in the world, try an experiment. Okay, this is his experiment. Forget about the world and the other people for a few minutes. Instead, look into your own heart. Can you become the source of a greater love? Can you think loving thoughts, of self and others? Can you extend these loving thoughts towards the rest of the world, even to people whom you feel don't deserve it? That's a tough one sometimes, and trust. Then you have to trust yourself. And that's that, it's back to like gifts of imperfection. Guidepost 5 is trusting your gut and your intuition. So this one is trust your intuitive heart. So this one's I just love this one. So it's like trusting your intuitive heart means listening to trusting that quiet inner voice that knows what it is you need to do. Done. That's it. So trusting intuition is my favorite guidepost in this book too. And it's number 5 in that book. So it's a really good book, how to wholeheartedly live in the gifts of imperfection. So positive emotional balance, it's just doing a few of those things, right? Positive emotional balance would be love, not fear. So fear, love. Fill yourself with love. That's all it is in that one. So, and this is just a little bit about how to get there. So these are my only 2 steps out of 5 to start you off. So in case you haven't seen the emotional intelligence webinar, this is it. So this is how you observe, you get smart, you rate your emotion 1 to 10, 10 being strong, you release fight or flight, and you track daily. Okay, so just observing. Number 2 is experiencing it. You allow your child to experience emotions and not stuff it. You don't fix them, you don't fix the emotions, you don't tell them they can't have it. We just redirect. And that there's different. If you have emotion with rage and you're kicking the wall, that's a behavior, not an emotion. So the behavior we can have limits to for sure. So be present, don't push it, be a witness to it. Using all 5 senses is really important. Okay. So this is the 2 slides. This one and this one is what we're going to focus on for a minute. So this is my slide of really how to get to long-lasting change. So 78% of people are done with their New Year's resolution by the 3rd week in January. So today's like, we've got another week and then we're all done. Like 80% of us. We're like, okay, this is our New Year's resolution. This is what I do. So it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Usually they are very, they're not SMART goals. They're not projects. They're way overdone. And and people don't understand what it takes to get to a project or a new behavior. And it is long lasting, right? So to do it continuously, it's really actually quite difficult, and it takes time, or we'd all be doing them, right? We'd all be, doing the habits that we all know are good for us, like eating, exercising, and sleep, just for example, for physical balance. Okay. So this slide, if you can't see the slides as I go through these, of course, you're just going to look at the PowerPoints when we get them emailed to you or watch it again. And so some of you might not be able to see slides as you're, in this PowerPoint, but we start with self-discipline. Okay. So this is this book, The Road Less Traveled. So The Road Less Traveled says, okay, so self-discipline. So, and responsibility, delaying gratification. So that's what this starts with. So there's so many steps to getting to motivation. I made this chart because I had way too many parents saying to me, my kid isn't motivated. Well, that's true. And it's because of this. It's just this simple. It's not, it's very difficult, but it isn't, but it is. It's like, okay, motivation is killed by fight, flight, or freeze. It doesn't exist unless you go through these steps. So, it's like, okay, my kid's not motivated. And there's lots of killing motivation in the back of the brain and what happens and why that happens and why we aren't getting our homework done or why we're not doing this or why we can't. Yeah. And there's lots of reasons. There's lots of factors, but this is just part of it. But the main reason is number 1, self-discipline. If we never will get to motivation until we conquer self-discipline. So we have to check them off. Okay. Number 1's balance. I just showed you the balance wheel. Number 2, boundaries. Go look at the other webinars for boundaries. We talked about that last hour. Time, energy, money is your values. Got to know your values. And then you have to have a higher purpose. Okay. So that's all I already covered, all that. So you have to have a higher purpose in what you do around your values to be self-disciplined. Like I talked about last hour of like, I have to be self-disciplined or I'd eat 4 donuts a day. And I have to have a higher purpose in not eating 4 donuts, and it's not just about this or this or this. It's about my balance. It's about my physical or, sugar and gluten. I don't know, it's like, so it's like, I think that donuts are really good for me. And I can tell myself that all day long, but they're not. So if I have it as a reward system, when we get down to reward system and I have a donut every here and there, great. But I'm talking, self-discipline of not having multiple donuts a day, like a whole pack. So delaying gratification. So that's the part about the donuts. I have to delay gratification. So I have to manage impulses, self-control, take power back, and pain before pleasure. This one is in this book, and he says, We have to teach this to our kids and ourselves and everyone by age 5. By age 5. And this is 1973, right? So it's like, okay, how do I get balanced? How do I get self-disciplined? And then he goes into balance, right? But self-discipline, it's like openness to challenge. Yeah, it's pretty yeah, it's escape from free. There's responsibility in here. It's like we have to have responsibility in delaying gratification. So that's why responsibility is over here in the 5 R's. Routine, responsibility, and reassurance has to happen in these 2, self-discipline and delaying gratification. We have to have a routine, we have to be responsible, and we have to have reassurance that the fears that are unseen and unreal are real fears, but we have to have reassurance that replaces the fears with hope. Okay. So this is my favorite one, the reward system. Okay. We will not get to motivation unless we have a reward. We will not ever do again delaying gratification and self-discipline if we don't have a reward. Think about if everybody didn't get paid when we all went to work, right? So say I got paid a year in advance with the salary, I'm either in Cancun, I have no integrity, or I'm a really crappy employee. Or I just keep working for the whole year and it's in the bank, but I don't get this paycheck that keeps me coming every 2.5 weeks, right? And we've got to teach our kids this because the reward system has failed lately in parenting. So what that means is we're not teaching delay of gratification by a reward system. So as much as we used to. So it was a delay because it was, you know, from the Depression to the 60s, there was tons of delay of gratification, right? Think about it. We had to wait. There wasn't Walmart. There wasn't Amazon Prime. I'm like, yes, I can get that tomorrow. I ordered 3 things today and they're coming to my door tomorrow. I don't have to delay gratification. It's just like, you know. So, but the part about the reward system that's super important is to make sure that it is a good distraction and not an avoidance. So 2 hours plus is an avoidance. For kids, it's 1 hour. So here's your reward system. You get to play video games for an hour. Anything after that, now it's an avoidance. It's not a reward system. So we just let them have a reward. And it has to be limited. It has to be, you know, more structured. A good distraction is 10 minutes to 2 hours for adults. So a good distraction is 10 minutes to 1 hour for kids. And so you do something for 50 minutes and then you stop. And that's a good distraction. And I find most often kids, parents, families, and individuals do not have a reward system built in. And so we don't ever get to this motivation down here, willingness, values, outside internal forces. So that's called natural consequences, right? We have to be motivated by our natural consequences. So in last hour, like, you know, if someone's eating and they have a diabetic issue and there's no outside internal forces, there's going to be outside forces eventually, right? They're going to be diabetic. And so the internal forces says, oh, don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. Keep eating donuts. Then it's like, yeah, the outside forces will come in and then you're motivated to change something, right? And then you have to be self-disciplined, delay gratification, or reward system. Then you're motivated to do it again. The only way we're motivated to do anything again in the brain is to have a reward system. So this reward it over here, it's got to be scheduled. And the resiliency takes time. 6 stages is next. I'm going to teach you about 6 stages. This is I've got like 4 or 5 models that are my favorite. 6 stages is one of my favorite. It did originate for substance abuse. It's for any kind of behavior. So just go over this slide. This is a handout on a slide. So this is not meant to, you know, because it's so small, you're not gonna be able to see it. But this is the handout for the 6 stages that I've put together. It's very simple. So pre-contemplation, denial. Contemplation, well, within a month, I'll probably do something new. Prep stage is I'm going to find out how I can change my diet so I don't become diabetic. Okay. And I still need a little convincing. I'm not there yet. I don't have a full purpose, a full higher purpose, of value system around changing my behavior so I don't go into full-blown diabetic. So stages of action is 4. So the stage of action, the first 3 months of doing something new is experimental. Okay. It's like, well, maybe I'll do it and I'll see how it works out. And that's not the New Year's resolution, people, because that one's already gone in a week. But this is like, I'm going to do something new and I'm just going to do this one thing. I'm going to read a book and I'm going to read the same chapter every single week. That's something new. And then I'm going to live by that. And I'm going to work on that for the whole year. That's something new. So whatever it is, it's a 10-minute distraction. It's reading for 10 minutes of this one book. And I'm going to change my behavior because of that. And then the 3 to 6 months is actually the new behavior. So you're in action. When you're in true action stage, you are doing the new behavior for 3 to 6 months. Maintenance is 6 months to 5 years. That doesn't mean that, if you quit smoking after 5 years and that you're not going to pick up a cigarette and smoke a pack a day again, because it's happened. I've seen it. It's like 10 years, one day, and they picked up right where they left off. That's because this is a neurotransmitter brain thing. Your neurotransmitters break off when you don't use them. We know that for a fact now in neuroscience. We can actually break off the wiring in our brain, the ones that we don't use. We want those to break off the ones that we don't need anymore. We want to build new ones to a new behavior. That's why it takes 6 months to 5 years. And then there's relapse anywhere in there. So when we relapse, the average is 4 to 6 times before, 3 to 4 times, but really for substance abuse and other addictive behaviors, it's 4 to 6 times of relapse before you stay in maintenance. So this is why it's really difficult. But termination, he added way later, and it just says, oh, I'm in termination. I don't desire the old behavior anymore. It's just not me. It's not my value system. I don't do it anymore. I've learned to move through that. Okay. So this is just another slide about the stages. So this is just a simple spiral pre-contemplation. So the minute you relapse, guess what, folks? You go into denial. You have to go all the way back up to pre-contemplation, because every time you relapse with something and you go back to old patterns, old behaviors, then you went into denial to do that. And you have to start over and go back into action. That's the problem. We have to stay in action for 3 to 6 months with the new behavior again to be able to go into maintenance. Now, that doesn't mean like the lady, the story is a lady that has diabetes and she has to quit ice cream and eating sugar and stuff like that. And so she lost 30 pounds. She was in maintenance. She was doing really good. And then she relapsed. But she relapsed maybe for a week. But she didn't gain her 30 pounds back that she lost that would help her with diabetes, right? So it's just a little bit of that. So here's the pre-contemplation note, maybe prep plan. Oh, you're going to do, and then you're going to keep going. So keep going is maintenance. So I like this little stages of change over here on the left of like, okay, this is what these mean. How do I keep going in this? How do I maintain a new behavior? For the new year, for the new life, for your new whatever, for relationships, for your career, doesn't matter, anything. So questions at the end of the day, this is just for fun, okay? What went well today, being grateful, being in the moment, random acts of kindness, who did I connect with? These are all gonna help you just actually not be in denial about how your day went. And then record that so you can maintain your new behavior. You have to be accountable. Accountability works. So accountable to someone or something. And then here's the books. Daring Greatly, Gifts of Imperfection, Brene Brown, Carlson, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. Of course, Covey, Franklin, there's your Man Search of Meaning, that little quote that I had at the beginning. Road Less Traveled. Pentis. So Chris Pentis is one of my favorite authors too. I've got multiple books. I read one of his books for Zen, the Art of Happiness one year, because I pick a book and read it over and over again for the year. And that was about, I think that was like 3 years ago I read that one. And I'm actually reading his Laws of Love for this year for me. So Pentis, and he's also done a lot for, like, he has a big thick book about addiction. So I just love the way he writes. So Truman, Feelings, Buried Alive. Oh, Where Were You 5 Years? So that's why I go through these books. Last 2 seconds. This one's a really fun little book. It's just a little book. It's like, where will you be in 5 years from today? And it's a super fun little thing where it's like you fill it in. Here's your balance, your environment balance. And then there's like spaces where you can like fill in and record a little bit. Everyday Matters, he goes through that. It's just I think it's a really cute book. One of my colleagues did a little class and he referenced this. So that's that. Okay, questions. We'll go to the chat real fast.
So no questions so far. Someone said a quote I like: discipline is deciding and choosing what you want most rather than what you want now, and doing the right thing whether or not you feel like it or are motivated. You can think of your future self and how your future self will thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We have no questions.
Okay, comments, great. Yeah,
covered it really good.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I'm just looking through the comments. Yeah.
People were asking what the numbers were on some of your slides, but it was just page numbers of that book you're referencing, and people.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So these books have like, so every one they have, just 100 things to stop sweating, about, right? And it's like, okay, yes, we'll send these slides, the whole PowerPoint to you, and then the recording. And then on Fridays, usually Heather has it out on YouTube, so you can watch it again. If you want me, I always say, just fast forward through the like, to the parts you want. So it's okay, because then you can fast forward through the video whenever you want. Show it to somebody else. Watch it with your partner. Oh my gosh, there's lots of kid ones on there. There's lots of other things. So, yep.
And I'll send the recording out today. Actually, probably tomorrow. And then, like she said, it'll be up on YouTube. And to search us on YouTube, just go to youtube.com and just search Blomquist Hill, and it will pull us up. And we did have a question come in. It says, ideas to help a colleague who is suffering with personal issues but won't get help.
Okay, so that's just sitting in their space, right? And it's like, okay, all you can do is coach and challenge someone. You can't persecute or rescue them. That's a whole other model that I use. And so think about the number one thing here is do not rescue and do not persecute and bully. So it's like, okay, so the opposite of that is coaching and challenging. You can only say, Blomquist is free, and I'm if you're in the same workforce or they have the same benefit as you, or I see that you're suffering a lot, and what kind of support system do you have? Or, you can't rescue other people's problems, because that's personalization. You're taking on their problems when you have no control over it. So sitting in their space, that's called empathy, not sympathy, empathy. And that's all you can do. And then if there's an emergency, then, someone's suicidal, someone's very, really in a bad spot, then that's where we intervene. But I don't know if that helps.
All right, that's all we've got. So thank you, everybody. I will send this recording out, like I said, tomorrow, and just watch for that. And you'll also get the PowerPoint slides as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, bye.